Alright, hey guys, and welcome back to another video. So today I wanted to do something fun. I'm sure there's a lot of people that might be starting to get a little burnt out on retro game collecting because we all know that prices are getting kind of ridiculous, and maybe you're kind of losing that spark. Maybe you just need that little rekindling to reignite your passion for collecting retro games. So I've come up with 5 ideas that maybe one of them will work for you and you can have fun again collecting retro games, because let's be honest, these prices are getting ridiculous and it's hard to do it on a budget. So I tried to pick out 5 fun ideas that you can do cheaply, affordably, and have a cool little sub collection to show for it. So let's start with one of the most obvious ones, and one that I think will be most accessible to a lot of people, and that is collect a launch lineup. A lot of launch lineups for consoles, with the exception of, quite a bit of them, but there's a lot out there that you can still buy very cheaply. For example, the PlayStation 2, huge library, and of course everything that I'm going to be talking about here today is going to be from the perspective of US launch lineups. So for example, the PS2 launch lineup, pretty gargantuan library, however everything can be bought affordably still. There's only a small handful of games that go for more than $20, like Evergrace, Time Splitters, Shadow of Destiny, stuff like that. There's not a whole lot that's gonna charge a lot, and even the games that are more expensive, they're still pretty cheap. And it can kind of be a cool time capsule, right, where once you amass the full collection, you can look back at it and say, wow, this is like, and you play the games, it's like reliving the launch of that console. And especially if you grew up or have fond memories of it, it could be a lot of fun. Invite some friends over, be like, let's relive the launch of the Wii, for example, right? Like, you get every Wii launch game, which wouldn't be too hard to do. They're all mostly still all cheap. Have some friends over and just have fun with the janky Wii launch lineup. The Xbox 360, another great example of large library of diverse games. A lot of them are quite good, and a lot of they're pretty much all, with the exception of a couple like Need for Speed, Most Wanted, and King Kong, Peter Jackson's King Kong, the movie game. Most of them are still pretty cheap, and even the ones that are getting up there, you can still get them without spending too much money compared to the rest of the retro game collecting scene. A couple other good examples would be like PlayStation 3, the DS, you can do quite affordably as well, the PSP, and maybe if you're looking to get a little more adventurous, you can do something like the Dreamcast. Dreamcast is kind of middle ground, right? It's got a large, diverse, fun launch lineup that is very doable in terms of how many games were released. There are some expensive ones, even Sonic Adventures like in the $70 realm now, Power Stone's over 100, but what you can either do is just completely ignore those expensive ones, or just save up for them, right? Like, make them the highlight of your collection, the last piece to the puzzle that you add at the very end once you've got all the cheaper stuff. I think you could have a lot of fun with it. Collecting launch lineups, fun, cheap, affordable, and I'm sure you can find, pick your favorite console. It wouldn't be that difficult to pick one out from the crowd to choose to collect. So let's go for something next. My next idea here is going to be something that won't be for everybody, but I think it could be really fun, especially if you're nostalgic for the rental era, and that is focus on only collecting games that are really beat up rental copies of games. So what do I mean by this? Instead of buying a slightly good used condition or excellent condition copy of I don't know, your favorite PlayStation 1 game, why don't you get that beat up, sun-faded copy where little Billy wrote his name on the cover. There's like 5 different passwords written by like 5 different people on the back of the manual. The disc has that terribly hard to remove Blockbuster or Hollywood Video rental sticker on it. Like, case is cracked. Maybe it's got a sticker on there that tells you the origins of like which store it came from with the town, and fun stuff like that. Maybe it's missing the original case entirely and it only has that generic Blockbuster case. I think that can be really fun. Imagine having an entire DVD rack or something just filled with essentially a Blockbuster collection of games, right? And each one has more personality because it kind of tells a story. You can kind of tell the wear and tear that it went through, and man, it could be fun. I really think, and a lot of these games, keep in mind, are very cheap. They're going to have scratches on the discs if you're getting disc copies of games, obviously, because rental copies tend to get quite beat up. But usually in that condition from a rental store, the more stickers and stuff, the better for your wallet, right? So if you can actually come around to the fact that bad condition, as long as the game still works, is good. It's fun, it's nostalgic, especially if you grew up in the Blockbuster era. I think that could be a lot of fun. right? Give it a try. If any of you try that one, by the way, let me know. Let me know how it goes for you. I'd be really interested to see a Blockbuster or rental store collection of games, like not even like the main chain, like the mom and pop rental type of places, right? They have their own unique stickers. Maybe they got a little logo of like their mascot on their logo sticker, right? That could be a lot of fun. All right, next one will be maybe try focusing on a publisher that's a little bit more obscure, right? Maybe you're a big fan of Atlas Games or Capcom or NIS America, Xseed. There's some really well-known but expensive publishers, right? Because a lot of people love their games, they're getting expensive. So maybe focus on something like AgeTech, right? If you're a fan of Atlas and Japanese developed games or published games, AgeTech I think kind of fills that niche of having this eclectic library of a lot of Japanese developed and then published to the US types of titles. They've done all kinds of stuff, anything from fishing games to volleyball games to like Armored Core games. There's a very wide array of games published by AgeTech. Some are way more expensive than others. So maybe not necessarily focusing on the entire collection, but that could be one to go with. Psygnosis. I personally am a Psygnosis collector. Anytime I see a Psygnosis published game, I tend to want to get it because they tend to publish games that I enjoy. They do a very, very wide array of different types of games, usually very arcadey, over-the-top action style stuff. And if I see a Psygnosis game, I trust it. I trust them as a publisher, and it's really fun. A lot of the games are still quite affordable, readily available. And maybe if you're a big fan of bad games, you want to go for something like Titus or Titus, whatever you prefer. Infamous for Superman 64. They have a pretty doable list of games that they've published over the years. And maybe if you're a fan of terrible games, because they have a knack for publishing bad games, maybe go with something like that for fun. Next one is something that might turn some people away, because a lot of people are still coming around to the idea of collecting these types of games. But what about focusing on greatest hits games, right? Think about if of course, certain consoles like the PlayStation 1 has stuff like Toy Story 2, which is very expensive. So maybe, unless you can afford it and save for it, maybe don't get every game in a greatest hits collection, but get the majority of them that you can afford, because typically greatest hits games and platinum hits, all that kind of stuff, they tend to stay very affordable. However, a lot of people, the reason why they don't like buying greatest hits is because when you stick them in with the rest of your collection, they stand out like a sore thumb. But if you focus on a subset and you have an entire shelf or something filled with greatest hits, they look pretty awesome next to one another, right? Have you ever seen an entire shelf of greatest hits of PS1 or PS2 or platinum hits of Xbox or something, or PS3? PS3's line of greatest hits is pretty cool with the red boxes. I mean, it's pretty neat, honestly, and it's not just neat in a collecting aspect, but it's neat in a historical context of sort of like a time capsule of, at the time, what were considered to be the best sellers for a console. So looking back at what people were buying at the time is kind of neat, right? It's kind of fun to see what essentially are, as they're called, the greatest hits of the time. And so you're not just collecting something for the heck of it, you're collecting something for the historical value of the time when those consoles came out. And typically, the nice thing about collecting greatest hits is those games are greatest hits for a reason, because they were usually good games that sold a lot of copies. So you're getting a good collection out of it, and you're having fun doing it in a mostly affordable way. The last tip that I'm going to give is maybe focus on a genre that you enjoy, but maybe never really considered solely collecting for. So something like, maybe you've enjoyed arcade fishing games in the past. Maybe just focus on collecting nothing but fishing games for a while, right? Not just only collecting fishing, but you know what I mean. Collect other stuff, but also just focus on collecting fishing games. Fishing games are so cheap. There's barely any expensive fishing games out there. And there's all kinds of fishing games. You got more fun, cartoonish style stuff like Finny the Fish on the PS2. And then you got, Sega Bass Arcade Fishing. You've got the more serious types of fishing games that are out there, more like simulator type. There's so many fishing games out there. And if you enjoy them, you can become a fishing game expert by essentially collecting everything that's out there for home consoles. Isn't that kind of cool and very cheap to do? I mean, it's cool to see pictures of people's collections, but imagine seeing a picture of every single fishing game that ever released. And then if you want to, go even deeper into the deep water, get every fishing pole accessory, get all that fun stuff, right? Other ideas would be maybe motorcycle games. Maybe you like racing games, but you never really thought about collecting every single game that features motorcycles, right? So, Road Rash series. Heck, you can even include stuff like Extreme G3, 1, 2, and 3, those kind of games, XGRA. Have fun with it, right? Car combat games. Everybody loves Twisted Metal, but, maybe go for the more obscure stuff that's out there. The Vigilante 8 games. Not saying that's obscure, but you know what I mean. Like Star Wars Demolition. You got, Dead in the Water or something? Shipwrecked. There's a ton of different car combat games out there, and, so most of them, for the most part, are still mostly affordable. What about compilations, right? There's a lot of arcade compilations out there. Midway Arcade Classics, Title Legends. Some of them are starting to get up there in price, but nothing's too crazy, you know what I mean? So maybe just focus on collecting arcade compilations, because when you buy one of those things, you're getting a ton of games at once, so you're getting good bang for your buck, and that's a pretty awesome collection to have. What about licensed kid games? Not just Disney. If you're a big fan of collecting Disney games, some of those can get pricey. What about janky third-party licensed stuff, right? Like maybe just collect movie licensed games, kid licensed games. There's so many of those out there, and most of those licensed games that are for kids are really fun 3D platformers. And they tend to be very cheap usually, as long as you're not buying them on the GameCube. That's a whole different story. Maybe you're a fan of terrible, bad games like me. Maybe you have an appreciation and look for the good qualities in the worst games that are out there. Go on Metacritic, go on the Wayback Machine and look up GameRankings.com and find the worst reviewed games of all time. Maybe pick the bottom 5 or the bottom 10 worst games ever released for every console and make it your goal to pick up those worst games of all time. And then that way you can say you have the worst video game collection in the world, quite literally. Right? So there you go. Those are just some fun ideas that I came up with off the top of my head to maybe help rejuvenate your love for collecting retro games on a budget in a fun and unique way that maybe speaks to your personal tastes and types of games that you're into and would be really fun to share with others as well. So anyway, guys, thanks a lot for watching. If you have any ideas for future videos that you'd like to see related to retro game collecting or game collecting in general, feel free to leave a comment below and maybe I'll pick your idea for a future video. Anyway, hope you enjoyed and thank you for watching.